Hi there. Today we come to chapter 6 in our Mission Handbook. This is the chapter that has to do with personnel. It's a big chapter. So why don't you just pull out this handbook and we'll start with the cover. Have a look at the faces that you see there. You're going to find an old-timey collage of faces through almost a century of service within our fellowship. Do you recognize anybody? Do you see anyone who looks even remotely like you? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, I'm not sure. If you don't, then our old-timey pictures are not yet sufficient. Many within our community speak English as their first language. This isn't going to surprise you. Others speak Spanish, Swedish, and Danish, or Mandarin as their first language, or Bangla, Nepali, Hindi, Urdu, maybe Swahili, Amharic, Dinka, French, German. You get the idea. Some of our people have been raised Catholic, or maybe Baptist or Presbyterian, and found their way into our little Lutheran community. We have young and old engineers and physicians, educators, farmers, loggers, even a few pastors. I'm telling you, it's quite a variety. You get the idea. And there's a reason for the variety. It's important to note that chapter 6 concerning personnel begins at the most basic level. There are some highfalutin paragraphs in this chapter, it is true, that talk about the high sacrifice and deep commitments and counting the cost and all those kinds of things. I mean, like, it's enough to make your hair stand on end. But chapter 6 doesn't begin there. You open up your handbook and you take a look and you'll see what I mean. Chapter 6 begins with a very basic kind of commitment. We believe that God has called all Christians everywhere to involvement in his mission in the world. Each one has a role to play. So I'd like to pause for just a moment and introduce you to a concept from the field of entrepreneurial science. It was popularized by a guy by the name of Eric Ries, and he called it minimal viable product. It's not in the handbook. It's kind of a little bonus. You're not going to find it described in the principles and policies of the World Mission Prayer League, but somehow I thought it germane. Minimal viable product. So minimal viable product has to do with the idea that entrepreneurs do well to focus on the minimal configuration of the product that they might want to bring to market. Let me give you an example. Here you have a kind of a series of product development. This is not the minimal viable product. I drive an old Saab 9.3, almost 20 years old. And let me tell you, that thing is not an MVP. This is not a minimal viable product. I mean, here we've got still gasoline involved. We've still got some kind of a serious sorts of mechanical support issues involved. Even this is not a minimal viable product. And neither is this. This is. You start there. And then you can add to it. Eventually, maybe, you will even add like internal combustion engines. So now, I have thought that concept illustrates in a way what we're talking about in chapter 6 of our Mission Handbook. This is not a minimal viable product. We don't start with all kinds of years of experience, all kinds of, like academic credential and experience and wisdom and public accolade and all kinds of stuff like that. This is not where chapter 6 begins. Chapter 6 begins here. It begins with people like you, the ordinary flock of the people of God, enlisted in the extraordinary cause of the people of God in the world. And if you are part of God's people, you are part of God's mission. So let's just open up a few of these paragraphs in chapter 6, beginning with paragraph 71. We believe that God has called all Christians everywhere to involvement in his mission in the world. Each one has a role to play. Through its personnel and regional offices, the Prayer League seeks to help its members to hear that call and to discover their place of maximum participation. The Prayer League is comprised of thousands and thousands of praying members who have told us that they want to be a part of our community. It's our goal for each one of them to discover their point of maximal participation in the King's work around the world. Many of our members will discover their place of participation at home, paragraph 72, in their own neighborhoods and in their regular occupations. Others will discover their place in extraordinary service elsewhere in the world. The mission expects that God will commission its members to a wide and wonderful variety of participations in his mission of love around the world. The Prayer League prays for such commissions. The mission also hopes to provide opportunity for fulfilling them, that spiritually gifted people from every walk of life may take an active role in sharing the gospel and themselves with those who have yet to know the Savior. So, if you have been following our little series of lectures, you may recognize this language. It comes actually from some of the earliest years of the World Mission Prayer League, and something that was happening on the campus of the Lutheran Bible Institute in Minneapolis in the mid-1930s. There were a group of young people who had the idea that God's mission implicated them, and they looked to discover how. They believed that God had a purpose for their lives, each one individually, and they set out to discover it. They called it their commission. This is how they described it in a newsletter from 1943. Our program is serving the broad vision in the local commission, and in turn then drawing from the local situation that which would serve the broad vision. Maybe you'll remember this from earlier in our talks. These young people thought that wherever they were in the world, whatever they might be doing, they needed to figure how it would somehow or another fit, how their own profession in life, their studies, their family, their community, their involvements would fit in somehow with God's program of love and redemption, salvation for all peoples everywhere. So this is where our handbook begins also, with a wide community of men and women committed to the Savior who want to demonstrate the Savior's love to the entire world. Now, what happens sometimes is that those friends who are committed to the cause of Christ around the world discover that maybe it will involve them in some kind of specific service and outreach. Then chapter 6 continues. They might appear in our office and inquire about the possibility of service. We call them missionary inquirers. There you see it in paragraph 76. We believe that in answer to prayer, God will call persons of his own choosing to offer themselves for missionary service within our fellowship. Then they contact our offices, and we will pray with them and talk with them about it. Sometimes we'll advise that they take a couple of aspirins and sleep it through and see if it doesn't disappear in the morning. Sometimes, however, the inquiry will develop into something more. They will pray, they'll talk with their friends, they'll talk with their pastor, they'll be in contact with our offices, and it's something that won't go away. In that case, we might invite them to apply for candidacy for missionary service. Paragraph 79, candidacy represents a formal and supervised period of preparation for eventual missionary service. Now, there's a whole lot of additional detail in the handbook that we're not going to go into here. You can look it through and you'll find plenty of guidance there. Let me just say in kind of bird's eye overview that candidacy will involve specific preparation for service within our fellowship. It might involve, let's say, reduction of debt that you have carried from school. It might involve maybe some additional preparation of one kind or another, maybe studying the Bible or studying cross-cultural anthropology or missiology. It might involve searching for a specific fit for your particular gift set. All of these things you will work out with our personnel office. We call this our program of candidacy. At the end of candidacy, we may invite you to apply for specific service, paragraph 85. Candidates may make application for missionary service upon satisfactory completion of candidacy. So it's not every candidacy that issues an invitation to apply for service, but many do. At the end of this period of supervised preparation, we may invite you to submit some additional forms and come in for some additional interviews, and then you will apply for service before our governing board or our executive committee. This then will issue in a specific call and a specific place of service and a specific kind of activity, lines of accountability, all those kinds of things become clear as you apply for service and wind up under assignment within the World Mission Prayer League. So you'll find that the Mission Handbook goes on to describe a bunch of other personnel-related categories in Chapter 6. There will be paragraphs that describe missionary children. Let me just say in summary that we believe in missionary children. And we want to serve our families so that they can serve their children in the most wholesome and helpful way. We have paragraphs describing retired missionaries. This is a category that I have come to know personally in recent months. Let me just say in general that we regard our retired missionaries as full-blown members of our entire missionary community and want to integrate them into the life of the mission around the world. You'll also find some paragraphs describing short-term volunteers. Let me say that we believe in short-term service. We have seen short-term service make absolutely incredible contributions here and there. And depending upon the specific circumstances and projects that you may be interested in, we have lots of opportunities for short-term service here and there. So there you have kind of a summary of Chapter 6. I mean, we haven't gone into a whole lot of detail. You're going to find more detail in the written document. Let me invite you to contact our personnel office and work these things through with our candidate coordinator or with our personnel director. So I want you to remember in conclusion that in spite of what we've said about, like candidacy and application papers and interviews and all that sort of thing, there really is a kind of minimal viable product. You go into the bathroom and look in the mirror and you're going to see what the minimal viable product is. You get on your knees this evening and you talk to God, and you're gonna hear what the minimal viable product is. The minimal viable product is you, just as you are, just with the complexities that you bring, just with the difficulties, just with the challenges, just with the possibilities, just with the strengths as well as the weaknesses that you have accumulated through life. You are the minimal viable product. As you collect all these things, all of your faith and all of your doubt, all of your possibility and all of your weakness, all of your strengths and all of your complexities, and you give it to God for service, and you trust it to Christ for his redeeming and for his commissioning. And then you're going to discover that little skateboard, all right, that little skateboard is something that God can build on. That product is something that God can bring to market, you might say. You committed, you commissioned is something that God can work with. And he's likely to add eventually, like an internal combustion engine maybe. He's likely maybe to use you in ways that you hadn't anticipated. So, I don't know what you expected from chapter 6, but this is what I'd like you to take away. There's a minimal viable product, and it is you on your knees. And God can do miracles with a product like that. So thanks. God's blessings on you. We'll see you again soon.